Folks, this video is regarding Donald Trump's recently hinted at trade tariffs on both steel and aluminum. And I hate to say it, but he's kind of right in that we need to do something about the steel and aluminum imports for this country. But I don't think that tariffs across the board are the right answer. Let me give you a little history lesson. First, the U.S. has been running trade deficits since 1975. And if you don't know what a trade deficit is, it's basically the difference between the amount of goods and products that you import versus the amount of goods and products that you export. So as I stated previously, we have been running trade deficits for the last 42 years. Now, that in itself is not all that bad if the trade deficit is not huge and ongoing. Now, the reason that we run trade deficits is because the United States economy has been one of the strongest in the world. And America is a consumer nation, i.e., our people do well, and since they do well economically, they are able to buy more. Whereas countries that run trade surpluses, a lot of them, not all, but a lot, their people aren't doing all that well, so they cannot consume, as much. Now, trade deficits can be a really bad thing if you run them continuously, as we have done. And at the present time, we are running approximately $500 billion in trade deficits. Well, it doesn't take Einstein to realize that you cannot run trade deficits forever because you run out of money. Now, in my opinion, instead of trade deficits, we should actually institute trade quotas and target those quotas to nations that are cheating. Specifically China, South Korea, and because of the recent events as far as the Russians screwing with us, we need to target the Russians as well. Now, trade tariffs and quotas can get nasty. Now, in my opinion, if we decided to get into a trade war with Russia, we wouldn't have a problem there. We would basically be able to crush them and get rid of whatever industry we targeted. We would not have, in my opinion, the same success if we got into a trade war with China or, to some extent, possibly South Korea. Everybody else that we import steel from and also aluminum from, we'd have a serious issue. Now, just so that you're aware, the United States is the world's largest importer of both steel and aluminum. We import approximately 35.6 million tons, and we only produce 6.8 million tons of steel. Now, that is quite a disparity, and we absolutely need to do something about that. We currently import approximately 90% of our aluminum and obviously only produce 10%. We used to have, within the last 10 years, 23 aluminum smelters. That number has been reduced to 5. And of the 5, only one of them produces military grade aluminum. if that smelter goes by the boards, we would be forced to import military grade aluminum from the UAE and China. And if you know anything about the world affairs, you know that China is not one of our biggest fans. And the UAE is constantly riding the line as far as being a friend or foe. So for us to be trapped into having to import all of our military grade aluminum from those two countries would put us at a severe national security disadvantage. Now Canada could step up and convert some of its aluminum smelting plants over to military grade, but they would have to make a conscious decision to do that. And again, we import 90% of the aluminum that's used in this country, or 8.3 million tons. Now, as far as steel is concerned, Canada is our single largest exporter to us of steel at 16.7%, followed by Brazil at 13.2%, South Korea 9.7%, Mexico 9.4%, Russia 8.1%, Turkey 5.6%, Japan 4.9%, Germany 3.7%, Taiwan 3.2%, China 2.9%, and keep China in mind, I'm going to come back to them, and India 2.4%. Now, as far as the quality of steel that we import, the countries that export to us the lowest quality of steel are China, Russia, and Taiwan. It has been noted that in various projects, specifically bridge building, that the imported steel from those countries, when used, was found to be absolutely substandard, to the point that entire bridges had to be ripped out and reconstructed several times until it was decided that the steel that came from those countries was insufficient, substandard enough that the companies building those bridges had to reorder steel from Canada and other reliable steel manufacturers. Now, we currently have approximately 130,000 steel workers in this country. And obviously, a tariff on steel is going to enhance their position. My problem with that is, by increasing the price of steel because of the tariff, you are going to affect approximately 5 million jobs in the United States. So that is, in my mind, counterproductive. In my opinion, since we know that we need to utilize a certain amount of steel in this country, what we should do is go to a quota system, and then use that quota system, obviously, to freeze out China, okay, which is producing substandard steel, and is also subsidizing the production of steel with various incentives. So it's producing steel and selling it below cost. We need to cut them out of the mix. We also more than likely need to cut Taiwan out of the mix, because China is also utilizing them in the dumping of steel. And we need to have a heart-to-heart talk with South Korea about their steel production and dumping. Now, Canada produces the steel that we like and is one of our biggest allies. We need not to tick them off about putting tariffs on steel imports. Okay? We don't want to start a trade war, which has already been hinted at by countries like Germany, who have indicated that they want to put tariffs on various products that they import from us, specifically alcoholic beverages. So that's the steel portion. As far as the aluminum portion is concerned, again, our number one supplier of aluminum is Canada, followed by Russia, again, the United Arab Emirates, and China. Now, just so that you know, China produces 50% of the world's aluminum consumption. And in my mind, that 50% is way, way too high. And the reason that they're doing it is they're using coal-fired furnaces, which is contributing obviously to the greenhouse effect and carbon emissions in our atmosphere. If we can reduce our reliance on the steel produced in China, China would have to look to other markets to push that aluminum out. And since we're the largest consumer of aluminum, there is no way that they would be able to find alternative buyers. This would have the effect of bolstering the U.S. aluminum manufacturing sector. And if prices can be maintained as far as the cost of aluminum are concerned, and we just end up putting more people to work, that would be a win-win for us, both in helping to bolster the aluminum, and let's throw steel in there as well, steel productions, those two particular industries. It would help us as far as our national defense is concerned, because we would be more reliant on our own aluminum and steel production and less reliant on those who might have a note to want to cut us off. It would create more jobs in the U.S. So as far as I'm concerned, for the U.S., it's a win-win. Now, obviously, for countries that we imposed quotas on and reduced the amount of aluminum and steel that we were importing, that would lead to less jobs for them. But at the end of the day, we need to be concerned about U.S. jobs, the U.S. steel and aluminum industries, and not so much concerned about individual countries. Now, I'm not talking about the world economy, because if we go too crazy, we're going to slow down the world economy, because that's what trade wars do. But quotas is a different story. Quotas can be targeted. And in my opinion, with the trade deficits that we're running with China, we absolutely need to target them because they absolutely do not play fair with us. Now, I don't know enough about the steel industry, but I do know a lot about the aluminum industry. And the World Trade Organization has been screwing us for years. Anytime we have a claim against a country like China or South Korea or Vietnam, as far as illegal and unfair practices as far as an industry is concerned, okay, instead of us being able to take direct action, we have to go to the World Trade Organization, of which we are a member. It takes 5 years to start a claim and see it to fruition. And we have filed claims against the countries I mentioned, China, Vietnam, and South Korea. We have filed claims against them, and we've won every single one of them. But the damage is done when it takes 5 years for us to stop the individual country. And then in China's case, what happens is they turn around and just move production to another country, and we have to start the process with that new country all over again. Now, it's been thought that we need to exit the World Trade Organization, and in my opinion, that is probably a bad idea. But what we do need to do is change the rules. And the one rule change that I would institute would be a tariff. And again, not us just instituting a tariff, but through the World Trade Organization, instituting a tariff on any country that we are filing an unfair claim against. So that even though it took the 5 years, the money would be in the bank that would compensate America, U.S. citizens, or the particular steel or aluminum companies that were unfairly operated against. Now, again, details would have to be worked out on something like that, but if we had have a problem with a country, we need to be able to take immediate action against that country to stop the unfair practices, and then let that country seek redress with the World Trade Organization, and we would obviously need to defend our position. But folks, if we don't do something about these giant trade deficits that we're running, as I stated at the beginning of this video, sooner or later, all of the industries that are targeted, steel, aluminum, etc., are going to disappear. Now, I kind of sort of feel the same way that action needs to be taken against a lot of these countries, because when the shoe's on the other foot, they have no problem creating all kinds of hoops and barriers for us to jump through when we're trying to export goods to them, whereas there are few realistic barriers to any country that we import from, particularly with most favored nation status. That status basically says no tariffs or any type of trade impediments between us and the country with the most favored nation status. That needs to be pulled, and there should be very few nations that we grant most favored nation status to, and in particular anyone who has taken action or creates barriers for our imports into their countries should not have the privilege of that most favored nation status. So anyway, I don't know what Trump's going to do, to be honest with you, because everybody is jumping up and down about this being the wrong thing. And to be honest, I think tariffs is the wrong way to go. And Donald Trump changes his mind like the weather, so he may or may not institute the tariffs on steel and aluminum. If he does, I would more than likely suggest that Canada be exempt from the tariffs, and everybody else be put, again, on a quota system, with China, Taiwan frozen out completely, South Korea severely reduced, okay? Severely reduced the amount of steel that they can export to us. And on Russia, with all the bullshit that they're pulling on us as far as our elections and democratic process is concerned, I would totally freeze them out. But again, just my opinion. Cannot run trade deficits forever, folks, and especially at the levels that we're running trade deficits. And yes, it will lead to increases in prices. I absolutely understand that. Supply and demand, first rule of economics. But if we can bring supply up through domestic means, the increases in prices should not be so severe that it starts to slow down around 1975. I think a little bit of pain will be more than worth it. Plus, we get to start, if we can get that trade deficit down to something manageable, we would hopefully be able to start repaying the national debt, which is at this date approximately $22 trillion.